What's up, everybody? This is Elliot from readwrite.com. In front of me, I've got the Microsoft Surface for Windows RT, Apple's iPad 3 released last March, as well as the Google Nexus 10 tablet. Today we're going to pit these devices head-to-head in some areas that my commenters wanted to check out, including browsing websites with Flash content, sharing and printing documents, and general user interface and multitasking functionality. Let's get started.
So the lock screen on the iPad is pretty void of information. You have date and time, that's about it. The home screen on the iPad consists of rows of applications. The only updates they can give you are numerical badges, but if you swipe down from the top of the screen, you'll pull up Notification Center where you can see more detailed updates. It's pretty customizable inside the Settings app, and apps you download can take advantage of this space. You can organize applications into folders across multiple home screens, but the icons themselves are completely static. Even something like the clock doesn't update in real time. Multitasking is pretty easy on the iPad with a double click of the home button or a 4-finger swipe gesture. That'll bring up the multitasking tray where you can see your recently opened apps and switch instantly to them. There's also an awkward 4-finger swipe gesture that switches between apps, though it works intermittently. The lock screen on the Nexus is pretty cool with features like facial recognition and pattern unlock. I like the swipe to unlock, which lets you choose between things like Instant Camera or Google. But my favorite thing here is the ability to add widgets. You can drag and drop these onto your multiple home screens. There's also a series of gestures you can make from the edge of the bezel to bring up things like your notifications, as well as quick access to settings like Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. There's a dedicated multitasking button which brings up your recently opened apps and allows you to switch very quickly between them. So the Surface has probably the most useful home screen. That's thanks to the live tiles. They update in real time to bring you information like the weather, headlines, updates on your email, etc. They're fully customizable, and you can download new ones from the Microsoft Store. A swipe off the bezel to the left brings up a quick settings menu where you can access things like Wi-Fi and brightness. There's also a second level menu where you can get into more detailed settings and do things like customize your lock screen with different wallpapers and widgets. The Surface has some pretty unique multitasking features. A swipe off the bezel to the right will bring up a floating window of your most recently opened app. You can dock it on the right or left of the screen, but it's kind of awkward when you choose to interact with one app. You essentially just play a game of ping pong back and forth between your open windows. You can invoke a multitasking bar on the left-hand side that allows you to choose a recently opened app. One of the other unique features is the Surface's desktop mode. This is essentially going to allow you to run your Surface as if it was a traditional Windows desktop computer. The bummer here is that the UI is that of a traditional desktop computer, so buttons are very small and hard to access via the touchscreen. So all three of these tablets feature proprietary web browsers. It is Safari on the iPad. It's a web browser with relatively minimal UI. You do have features like tab browsing. You can also save tabs using the new iCloud feature. Microsoft's Fishy Tank yielded a solid 58 frames per second at 20 and 50 fish, though the background was surprisingly absent. Peacekeeper's Future Mark test is an HTML5 benchmark test, and it ran quite smoothly on the iPad. Pushing things like dynamic shapes to their limits proved a little bit chunky, but overall, fluid dynamics and video playback all played very nicely, yielding an overall score of 492. Of course, the iPad's native browser does not support Flash, so if you go to a lot of Flash sites, expect to end up at this page. Now, there are some workarounds for this. One that I like is the Puffin browser. It's $1.99 and gives you full Flash support, and it works quite well. Websites load very quickly on remote servers, then the content is sent back to your iPad. Now, this will work for video, but also games. There's even a mouse icon in the lower left-hand corner that'll bring up a cursor so you can access things like hover states. It's pretty cool to see Flash running on the iPad, and if you need to have it, $1.99 isn't too bad, but Apple definitely puts you in the situation of having to find your own software solution. Chrome on the Nexus 10 is a great browser, also featuring tab browsing synced across all of your devices. It did pretty well on Microsoft's Fishies test, running at 30 FPS on 20 fish. Bumping it up to 50 fishies, it slowed down just a couple frames. The Peacekeeper test started out a little choppy on the Nexus 10, but it was able to crank its way through the physics tests, yielding an overall score of 646. Now, Flash is also not supported in Chrome for Android. However, there are a couple of workarounds available. Again, the Puffin browser is a nice software solution, and it is available in the Google Play Store, but you're again put into a situation where you need to spend a little money if you want to get that otherwise free plugin on your tablet. Internet Explorer is the native browser on the Surface. It's a really nice browser. It switches to full screen when you scroll. A swipe from the bottom will bring up your URL bar. A swipe from the top will bring up your tabs. It's a pretty quick browser, and I really like the URL bar as it gives you dynamic bookmarks as you type, instant results. The Fishies test, we hope that it does really well in Internet Explorer. It does pretty well. We have 42 frames per second at 20 fish and a drop down to about 38 to 41 frames per second with 50. Peacekeeper started out doing really well on the Surface. The initial animations were quite fluid. Like we saw on the iPad, as things got a little bit more complex, it started to run and a little slower and stutter a bit. Towards the middle of the test, in the video section, we received a number of messages saying that the codec was not supported by this particular browser, and it would go ahead and skip to the next test. Overall, this yielded a relatively low score of 330. Not bad, but not the fastest web browsing experience across these devices. One of the biggest draws of Internet Explorer on the Surface is native Flash support. You can go right over to Hulu, click on any episode of a show, and it will load up very quickly, and it's, again, really nice to have that functionality out of the box. But Flash support does not work everywhere, as a number of sites that we visited told us that Flash was not installed, and we were unable to install it from adobe.com. So finally, let's talk about sharing and printing documents. Now, like we saw with the web browsers, each tablet has its own proprietary Office-esque software. On the iPad, that is iWork. The word processor here is Pages. Now, I'm not going to go into too much detail on the word processor itself, but again, mostly take a look at the sharing and printing functionality. Apple makes it pretty easy. You tap the wrench icon and you have all your tools for sharing and printing. What we can do here is email the document, obviously, open it in another app so you can send it to different applications. To example, say print on a remote computer, copy it to iTunes so you can access it like a wireless file-to-file transfer, or of course copy it to a web dev server, which is probably your most useful enterprise solution. Printing from the iPad is a pretty limited affair. You need to have an AirPrint capable printer. Those are relatively rare in the enterprise setting, and if you want to connect to an IP printer, you're forced to send your document to a third-party application running software on a host computer to do so. Google Drive is not included out of the box on the Nexus, but it is a free download from the Play Store. It gives you access to all the documents you have uploaded to Google Drive. You can edit them in a pretty nice word processor right on your tablet. And when it comes to sharing, you have a couple different options as well. It's really nice to be able to invite people to collaborate on your document. All you need is their Google or email address. And if you want to print, you're again going to be locked into this proprietary print software from Google. It is called Google Cloud Print. Now, this, again, is pretty cool to send stuff between your devices, similar to iCloud, but unfortunately, unless you have a Cloud Print enabled printer or the printer is hooked up to a Cloud Print enabled computer, you're going to be out of luck printing easily from your tablet. Now, over on the Surface, as you might expect, we had the most robust capabilities of connecting to printers once we got into the desktop mode and used this thing as if we were using our Windows-based PC. That means opening up Control Panel, going into your configuration setting, adding a new printer via IP, and setting it up just as you would on your desktop computer. Now, this worked very well. I was able to wirelessly connect to and print from any computer in the office. All I had to know was its IP address. So this is a great enterprise solution. Unfortunately, getting there is a bit cumbersome. The menu is buried in a couple hidden places on the surface, and again, the UI of the desktop browser is just not intuitive for a touch interface. There's also some nice options for sharing your documents with Microsoft SkyDrive, invite people to collaborate, or even present them to an audience online via a web browser.
So there you have it, Surface versus iPad versus Nexus 10. It's hard to declare a clear winner in this test as each tablet excelled and had shortcomings in specific areas. The Surface was really great at connecting to an IP printer wirelessly and making printing a seamless experience for a tablet. But it took a bit of work in order to do so, and the UI required on the desktop version of Surface for Windows RT is a little wonky. It's essentially a mouse interface that you're adapting to a touch display, and I think it could be done a bit better. The iPad, on the other hand, has a beautiful and intuitive user interface, but it's starting to feel a bit dated. You don't have any live information on the home screen, and the lock screen is pretty much useless. Beyond that, the iPad does excel in browsing the web unless Flash content is something that's extremely important to you. As I mentioned, the Surface does support video-based Flash sites right out of the box, but on both the Nexus and the iPad, downloading an app can get you around that if you're willing to make the $2 investment. Finally, I think the Nexus is kind of a balance of the two. It doesn't really excel in the enterprise arena, but it does give you a bit more customizable options than the iPad does. You really want to choose the tablet that is best suited for you. As I said, I love browsing the web and downloading apps, allowing me to play games and edit photos. So for me, the iPad is the best choice. If you're going to be using it in a strictly Windows-based enterprise arena, then definitely go with the Surface. And if you need a balance of the two, the Nexus 10 might be the best choice for you. We'll update this review as I can get my hands on the new iPad with the A6X chip. And of course, for all tech updates and coverage, be sure to visit readwrite.com. I hope you have a great day.